Okay. But I've got an announcement. I actually have an announcement. Yes. Just put it. Before Dr. Kengor returns, I wanted to point out that his books are up here for $20 a piece, and he will autograph those books for you and personalize them, and they make great gifts. I bought several and plan to give those out as gifts. The one book, Crusader, that is the book specifically that was made into the movie Reagan. That was the blockbuster movie in 2024. I mean, so I honestly, I can't believe there's even any books left of that here, because that was was on, like, the #1 New York Times best-selling. So I'm shocked that that's still even on the table here. The Crusader, and that, because I said that, now I need to run over here and make sure I get mine. All right, before he returns, I'd like to highlight an upcoming event that we're planning with Voices for Life to commemorate the overturning of Roe v. Wade and Indiana's abortion ban, and it's titled Fight for Life, the Next Chapter. This will be June 26th, so mark your calendars, and please, really, I mean, if you haven't got our newsletters, please sign up on our website, and the short way to do that is ccup.life. To get to our website and subscribe to our newsletter, and that way you'll get a notice about this. But the whole purpose of this event is to educate pro-lifers on the ongoing threats to the preborn in a post-Dobbs world. Voices for Life is suing the Department of Health here in Indiana because after the Indiana abortion ban went into effect, they just decided that they weren't going to release the pregnancy termination reports anymore. And to give you some sense, those pregnancy termination reports tell you what the underlying complications are to the women from those abortions, okay? They have found very serious issues in the past with women, and this is the only way that they can detect what's going on, okay? All I'll say, I'll suffice it to say this, they got some complication reports, not the pregnancy termination reports, from the hospitals, and they found out recently that one child was born alive, okay? They found out that of the 33 abortions in the fourth quarter of 2024, there were 15 that had major complications, and 8 of those, they left parts of the baby in the mother's wombs. So it behooves us to have those pregnancy termination reports. So why are we doing this event? We are bringing in the Lieutenant Governor, Micah Beckwith, as our keynote speaker, and we're going to go to his church, okay? So he's Protestant, so okay. We're going to go to Life Church, and we're going to do this event. We're going to raise money for Voices for Life, because that's what CUP is about. We don't do things for ourselves. We try to do things for other people and to educate. And so I want everyone in this room to sign up for that event. We're going to make it a free event so that you then donate to Voices for Life, okay? Can I count on you all to register for that? June 26th. It'll be in the evening. We're going to give you free drinks, free food, show up, okay? All right, so without further ado, we are bringing Dr. Kengor back up. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to hear about this. I'm just going to title this myself. This is all about the church versus communism, and guess who wins? Who do you think wins?
We win.
Yes, Dr. Paul Kengor.
All right, thanks again, Vicki. All right, so how the Catholic Church confronted communism and socialism. So we'll jump right into this. So it's a natural segue from what we just talked about with Marx, right there, right? The Communist Manifesto, 1848, and what Marx and Marx believe. Workers of the world unite, seek to abolish all private property, the things that we just talked about. There's one quote here that I wanted you guys to see that I didn't have in the last slide. The bottom one here. So everyone remembers in the Communist Manifesto that it closes with workers of the world unite, right? And we have a world to win. But they also put in the closing paragraphs, and you can see this quote in the bottom of the slide, Marx and Engels wrote, "The communists disdain to conceal their views." In other words, this is why we're publishing our book, because we want everybody to know what we're about and what we want to do. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by, there's that phrase again, the forcible overthrow of all existing conditions. So their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Basically, everything that exists. Some other things there, they called for, so the Communist Manifesto, as I said, talks about abolishing all kinds of different things. So abolishing private property, forcible overthrow of everything that exists. And for the students who say to me, it's a really pretty good book if you just read it. As I said, they talk about criticism, abolition, you name it. They also talk in there about abolishing home education. All right, home education. And they say here in the book that's supposed to talk just about sharing and helping the poor and labor, Marx and Engels wrote, "Do you charge us with wanting to stop the exploitation of children by their parents?" Now you would think they would say here, well, that's absurd. I mean, parents raise the children, right? And they say, no, yes, exactly. That is precisely what we intend. To this crime, we plead guilty. But, you will say, we destroy the most hallowed of relations when we replace home education by social. Well, yeah. I mean, we believe, as Catholics in particular, that the first school is the home, right? The parents are the first teacher. And they see that as gobbledygook, as they put it. In fact, Marx railed against what he called the disgusting bourgeois claptrap about the family and education and the hallowed correlation of parent and child. Well, we actually believe that the relation between the parent and child is hallowed. It is sacred. It is special. We don't see parents teaching their children as parents exploiting their children. In the 10-point plan, Marx and Engels had a 10-point plan. And point 10, so point 1 is abolition of property and land. Point 2 and 3, implementation of a progressive income tax, abolition of all right of inheritance. Can you believe the moxie there, right? Abolition of all right of inheritance, when they're only surviving because they're living off of Engels' inheritance from his father, right? And Marx isn't making any money at all. But point 10 in the 10-point plan called for, quote, free education for all children in public schools. So they wanted to ban homeschooling, home education. They wanted to ban private schooling, religious schooling. One of the first things that the Bolsheviks did was they ended all religious education by the Russian Orthodox Church. So all the young people were to be put into the public educational school collective. And there they would be taught religion is the opiate of the masses, religion would be banned, they'd have their new book, the Communist Manifesto. This is where they were afraid of parents and churches teaching the children. So they sought to ban that. And how many people in America today, and especially in states like California, right, have been trying to stop homeschooling? They don't want you homeschooling. But by the way, they'd be okay with you homeschooling your kids if you taught them what they want you to teach them, right? But their fear is what these parents might be teaching their children, right? If they knew what my wife was teaching my kids, right? Using the curriculum that she teaches with homeschooling, they just, I can't believe that. Too much religion. So they tried to ban it. They hated religion and moral absolutes. Here again are some quotes from the last presentation. Communism begins where atheism begins. Religion is the Asai of the oppressed creature. There is nothing more abominable than religion. And I wanted you to see this one. They close the Communist Manifesto by saying the communist revolution represents the most radical rupture with traditional relations and traditional ideas. So they themselves, they were really against tradition. And they said in their book, these ideas represent the most radical rupture in traditional ideas and traditional relations. So they understood. They knew how radical their ideas were. I mean, if you picked up their books, and you know how wild this is, they'd say, yeah. This represents the most radical rupture in traditional ideas and traditional relations. They also talked about the abolition of the family. The family. Marx wrote a letter to Engels saying, "Blessed is he who has no family," where he was complaining about his kids having to put a roof over their heads. I mean, it's not exactly one of the Beatitudes there, right? Blessed is he who has no family. And in the manifesto, it actually says, right, abolition of the family, exclamation mark. Even the most radical flare up at this infamous proposal of the communists. Abolition of the family. So in 1848, publishing this book in February 1848, they could even say at that point that the Marxist idea of abolishing the family was already an infamous proposal of the communists. And yeah, this is why the church and everyone else was watching these guys. The German government, there were Prussian German police spies who were monitoring Marx and Engels because they knew how radical these ideas were. As they said in their own book, it's the most radical rupture in traditional relations and traditional ideas. Abolition of the family. Abolition of the family. All right, so here's the three that took over in Bolshevik Russia. Who are they from left to right? Stalin, Lenin, and our buddy Trotsky.
Who didn't make it.
Yeah, that's right. He eventually gets purged by Stalin, like everybody else does. So they took over Bolshevik Revolution. Ken and I were just talking about this at the table a few minutes ago. They took over October, November 1917, Russian Revolution. The Tsar had abdicated the throne February, March 1917 during World War I. And so with that, the whole government pretty much falls apart. There's a transition government, the Kerensky government. So the Bolsheviks take over by revolution, by force. These communists are never elected, certainly never re-elected. They always get in, they ban elections, abolish elections, among other things. I mean, Castro never held an election. If they hold elections, they'll get booted out of office. It's immediately followed, the Russian Revolution, October, November 1917, by a Russian Civil War from 1918 to 1921 between the Bolsheviks and, Mensheviks. Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. Over 7 million people, men, women, and children, died in Russia in that Russian Civil War. And the Bolsheviks won. By the way, Russia, no country lost more people in World War I than Russia. And then they get pulled out of the war. They would have been on the winning side. It would have been on our side in World War I. So they lose the most people in World War I. Then they lose 7 million in the Russian Civil War. And then they get this massive purge under Stalin. Then in World War II, they lost 20 to 30 million people in World War II. How many people did we lose in World War II? About 400,000. About 400,000. And everybody had an uncle who died in World War II. I mean, Russia lost 20, 30 million people. And then that's followed by the Cold War, all the people that they lose in the Gulag, 20, 25 million people according to the Black Book of Communism. Higher than that, I'll give you some numbers on that pretty soon. But just an enormous amount of death. A Polish friend of mine, Jan Winiecki, I asked him one time if he hated Russia because of all the stuff, and he said, no, I just feel sympathy for the Russian people. I don't know any people that have lost so many people in war, even to this day. I mean, right now, with the war in the Ukraine, they're losing an entire generation of Russian young men.
And a number of them have left Russia.
Yeah, they're leaving Russia, being forcibly conscripted to the front lines. Russian women are losing a whole generation of men to marry because of this. They're already hemorrhaging population to begin with. They're getting no immigration, of course. I mean, what 20-year-old guy is going to want to go there and become a Russian citizen and get sent to the front lines in Ukraine? It's just gone on and on in the country. So communism, Marx and Engels finished their manifesto by saying, workers of the world unite. We have a world to win. So the goal immediately is to take this globally. Marx and Engels had written in 1850, Marx said this to the Communist League, our interest is to make the revolution permanent, not only in one country, but all the leading countries in the world. It'd be bad enough if they just wanted it in what became the Soviet Union, but they wanted it to be worldwide. The only way they thought it would work is if the whole world was communist. So they had to do the whole world. That was the idea. Lenin said, we've always emphasized you can't have a socialist revolution in just one country. Our victory will be a lasting one only when we conquer the whole world, because we launched it exclusively counting on world revolution. He said this in March 1919 when they launched the Comintern. More on that in a minute. The existence of the Soviet Republic side by side with the imperialist states for an extended period of time is unthinkable. In the end, either one or the other will conquer. And as a result, a series of horrible conflicts between the Soviet Republic and the bourgeois states is unavoidable. Unavoidable. There is going to be permanent war. Even American presidents like Woodrow Wilson, who was the progressives' progressive, said, you got to understand what these guys are about. These people aren't like progressives. I mean, they want to take over the whole world. I mean, this is really dangerous. It's why you can't have an American Communist Party, because it will answer to these guys that they want to take over the whole world. They want violent revolution, horrible conflicts. It's right in their own documents. And so they launch what's called the Soviet Comintern. Comintern stood for Communist International. They launch it in March 1919, there in Moscow. There's a picture of it right there. This group will be the headquarters of the world revolution. Every country will have one communist party that has to answer to Moscow. So that's March 1919. So world revolution is the watchword of the day. World civil war is the watchword of the day. So they launch it in March 1919 in the Soviet Union in Moscow. We get our first American Communist Party just a few months later, 6 months later, September 1919, in what city? Chicago. 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 I have the actual document. I got it from the Soviet Comintern archives on Communist Party USA in Congress. And it's a letter from Charles Ruthenberg, the head of the American Communist Party. It says, 1219 Blue Island Avenue across the top. Greetings, comrades, right? We've done it. Long live the Soviet International Republic. Long live the Comintern. Long live Marx and Engels. We've done it. We've started the American Communist Party here in Chicago. Chicago, we've done it. Ruthenberg is today buried in the wall of the Kremlin, in the wall of heroes in the Soviet Union. Yeah, so it all started in Chicago. They eventually move it to New York, and New York becomes really the place for it. I have a report, an FBI declassified document. At one point by the late 1940s, there were probably about 60,000 Communist Party USA members. Over half were from New York City alone. That was the hotbed. And their favorite university of choice? Columbia. Columbia, yep. That's where Belladod became a communist. It's where Whittaker Chambers became a communist. It's where Thomas Merton became a communist. So, hey, it's their job. You know, they do it well, right? Send your kid there for 80 grand a year. You know, that's what you're paying for, right? So they create Communist Party USA, and this is why these people aren't just like, you know, the liberals or conservatives or Democrats or Republicans. They swore, if you became a member of Communist Party USA, you swore a loyalty oath to Stalin's Soviet Union. And this is the 1935 loyalty oath. You put up your right hand. You didn't put it on a Bible, right? I pledge myself to rally the masses to defend the Soviet Union, to remain at all times a vigilant and firm defender of the Leninist line of the party, the only line that ensures the triumph of Soviet power in the United States. William Z. Foster called it a Soviet American Republic. Yeah.
So, because I'm going to forget later, our government had to know that this was going on.
They did.
Why did they allow this?
This is why they created the House Committee on Un-American Activities, and both the Democrats and Republicans were united in knowing that how bad these guys were. Even Woodrow Wilson saw it, and the communists would lie in America about being dedicated, but we all knew that they were, and then they would get the liberals and convince the liberals that they were being persecuted. And the liberals became dupes. That's why I wrote a big, long book called Dupes, right? And so the liberals would be hoodwinked by like Hollywood 10. Every single member of the Hollywood 10 was a card-carrying communist dedicated to Stalin's Soviet Union. And when Congress tried to expose them, they told their liberal actor friends, Judy Garland, Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, Danny Kaye, all the others, we're innocent. We're liberals just like you. You know, Congress is lying. And then they get to Washington, D.C. in October 1947, and they're called to testify, and Congress, Democrat committee, presents all these CPUSA numbers, all these canceled, or all these checks to the party, everything else. And then Bogart and all the others learned that they had been lied to. They had been had. This is what led Ronald Reagan to eventually leave, because Reagan had been a dupe. Reagan was an after-dinner speaker at these progressive events, and he learned that the progressive events were actually secretly run by communists. And so Reagan, a light bulb went off. Reagan testified before Congress in that same thing. We have this in our Reagan movie. We have Dennis Quaid, right? And Reagan testified, it was what was called a friendly witness, rather than the unfriendlies, who were the Communist Party USA members. The friendlies included Reagan, Gary Cooper, some other great anti-communist actors, actresses. Let me think. John Wayne, of course. Who else? Who was it?
Charlton Heston.
Charlton Heston was a big one. Barbara Stanwyck, one of my all-time favorite actresses. She was in Meet John Doe. Frank Capra. Frank Capra was a big anti-communist. Frank Capra did It's a Wonderful Life. Jimmy Stewart, big anti-communist. Ginger Rogers, big anti-communists. The liberals, the communists of the Daily Worker hated her, trashed every movie she made. I mean, Ginger Rogers, you know, lovely, cute Ginger Rogers dancing with Fred Astaire. How could you hate Ginger Rogers, right?
Backwards.
Yeah, but they hated her because she was an anti-communist. So there were a lot of actors. Bob Hope was really good. Bing Crosby. Yeah.
Didn't Frank Capra, wasn't he one of the guys who made movies, videotaped what was going on, D-Day, et cetera?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
He
so
did.
He certainly saw what war was like.
Right.
And
Right.
certainly didn't want any of that in the United States.
Yeah, Capra was also really appalled by FDR's tax rates. If you read Capra's biography, he gives, FDR had a 94% tax rate on highest income Americans. 94%. And in Capra's book, he would say, he would go out of the way to say, now people probably think I made a lot of money from It's a Wonderful Life or Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Well, let me just say, my royalty check was $240,000. But after $220,000 of it went to the U.S. federal government, I had about $20,000 left. People think I made a lot of money from, it happened one night with Clark Gable, whatever. But after the government took my 94% tax rate, and FDR wanted a highest rate of 99.5% on incomes over $100,000. That's in Bert Folsom's book, FDR Goes to War. He lays that out. His fellow Democrats said, you can't do that. You just can't. 99.5% rate on income over $100,000. You can't do that. Yeah, why when Ronald Reagan, that's what pushed Reagan into the Republican Party. Yeah, Reagan said that these tax rates are obscene and this is unconscionable. You can't do this. And FDR also tried to take everybody's gold. They bought all the gold to put it in Fort Knox, and if you had gold, you were supposed to sell it to the government. Don't worry, we'll make you an offer you can't refuse.
Right.
We'll give you a fair price for your gold. And if you hid your gold, that was considered illegal. You weren't allowed to do that. FDR also sought to discredit one of my Pittsburgh native sons, Andrew Mellon, because the Mellon tax cuts in the 1920s were so good. So he pursued Mellon's scalp terribly. It really drove Mellon to his grave. All right. Langston Hughes, who your kids and grandkids now are required to read in public schools as a civil rights poet, said, when we take over, put one more S in the USA to make it the USSA once we took over.
Bullet point.
Yeah.
William Foster,
Yep.
board member of the ACLU.
That's right. He
Do
was,
we have any description? Now we know why the ACLU is like it is.
yeah, they hated religion. ACLU hated religion. They were founded by Roger Baldwin and Harry Ward, who is known as the Red Minister. He's the only person on the whole board who supposedly believed in God, but he created a massive front group called the Methodist Federation for Social Action. We think Harry Ward was actually a card-carrying member of the party. Roger Baldwin, the ACLU founder, wrote a 1929 book called Liberty Under the Soviets. And William Z. Foster, the head of Communist Party USA, wrote the book Towards Soviet America, was an ACLU board member. Yeah. Black Book of Communism, that's the Harvard University Press book, says in total, communist governments from 1917 till about mid-1990s were responsible for the deaths of over 100 million people worldwide. That number is actually conservative. That's Lenin, by the way, today. Lenin is Lenin's tomb. He's embalmed there in Moscow. But according to the Black Book of Communism, the Soviet Union, 20 million deaths, China, 65 million deaths. But we now know the numbers on the Soviet Union. It's way higher than 20, way higher. Solzhenitsyn, Robert Conquest, Gorbachev had Alexander Yakovlev try to tabulate the numbers in the 1990s. Yeltsin did too. And Yakovlev said, Stalin alone annihilated 60 to 70 million people. The latest numbers, China though seems to be the worst. China, the latest numbers on China, over 70 million dead. Over 70 million. And the Black Book of Communism published too early because when they were publishing, modern North Korea was in the process of starving 2 to 3 million people to death in the late 1990s. So you're looking at a minimum 100 million people dead from communist ideology. Probably closer to 140 altogether. So the deadliest ideology in history, by far. Nothing even comes close to it. Okay, how the Catholic Church responded. This is quite profound. And a couple people asked me my conversion story. When I was an evangelical Protestant and an agnostic before that, studying the Cold War and communism, and I started reading these Catholic Church encyclicals and heard about things like Fatima, which I'll talk about in the next presentation, I thought, this is unbelievable. I mean, it's like these guys had a crystal ball. I mean, no one, the Catholic Church had him pegged from the very beginning. Had him pegged even before the manifesto was published. It's incredible what the church knew about this. Had to be Holy Spirit driven for what there's no rational explanation as to how the church could have understood this. It had to be spiritually inspired. Okay, so very early encyclicals. Reminder, when was the Communist Manifesto published? I hope you guys are taking good notes. There's going to be a test at the end of the day. 1848. 1848. The first church encyclical against communism is 1846 by Pope Pius IX, who was Pope from 1846 to 1878. Longest pontificate ever other than St. Peter. By the way, in 1876, he named as Camerlengo a guy named Vincenzo Pucci, who would become Leo XIII. But so 1846, one of his first encyclicals called Qui Pluribus refers to communism as absolutely contrary to the natural law, if implemented, would destroy the rights, property, and possessions of all men and even society itself. How could I have known that already? Now, communism did exist. The reason that they write the manifesto is the people of the Communist League came together and they said, we need a statement, a manifesto of what we believe. So Karl, Friedrich, you guys write it. So they published it in 1848. We think the word communism was first coined in Paris some point in the early to mid 1840s. So it was around. And our church was, they didn't have an internet or anything like that back then, right? But they were already on this. 1849, he published Nostis et Nobiscum, Pius IX, which called both communism and socialism wicked theories, perverted theories, pernicious fictions. Leo XIII, who our new Holy Father is named after. 1878, so he begins, so Pius IX dies in 1878. So Leo XIII becomes Pope from 1878 to 1903. So we had two popes from 1846 to 1903. Two of the longest serving ever. When Leo XIII died at age 93, he was the longest living pope ever at that point. By the way, it's probably still true. I think it is. Yeah, I think that's probably still true. So he published in 1878 Quod Apostolici Muneris, which called Communism, the fatal plague which insinuates itself into the very marrow of human society only to bring about its ruin. Now remember that stuff because you're going to hear from social justice Catholics in the next few years. Oh, Leo XIV condemning communism, but Leo XIII never condemned communism, right? No, he was all about social justice, right? In fact, he was probably for socialism. Not true. In Rerum Novarum, he actually never even mentions communism, but mentions socialism 5 times and condemns socialism throughout Rerum Novarum.
And he advocates private property for the common man.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, they'll give you this stuff like, oh, but he defends labor, and so did Karl Marx. Right? No, read the manifesto, all right? This is Qui Pluribus again, 1846, 2 years before the manifesto was published. This is an amazing quote. Communism is a dark design of men in the clothing of sheep who are inwardly ravening wolves. I don't know how they do this, because I don't think this was even happening yet. But it will happen throughout the 20th century in every communist country. After taking their captives gently, they mildly bind them, and then they kill them in secret. It's like you had a crystal ball. It's like looking ahead and seeing, Cardinal Mindszenty in Hungary, right, in a prison, or seeing, it's incredible they can know this. Their writings teach sinning, spread widespread disgusting infection, filled with deceit and cunning. They spread pestilential doctrines everywhere. And I really like the phrase, they also mislead people whose minds are imprudent, right? People who are easily deceived. I would say duped. And that's been a gigantic problem. People who just don't get it. So the communists will come up and say, well, blessed are the peacemakers. I've read your Acts 4:32, 4:35. It talks about sharing things in common. Well, that's what Karl Marx said. And you'll get these kind of social justice Christian types to be like, well, yeah, I guess that's true. We have a lot in common with the communists, don't we? These guys are saying, don't fall for that. Read their documents. Just because Hitler could walk through the door and say, well, blessed are the peacemakers, right? And Neville Chamberlain says, I got it right here from Hitler, peace in our time. Yeah. Hitler talked peace, right? Well, of course he did. This quote down here, as a result of this filthy medley of errors, called communism a filthy medley of errors. We see the church attacked, the holy religion attacked, the rights of human beings plundered, this holy see attacked. That's just 1846. Here's our boy, Leo the 13th. Quod Apostolici Muneris on socialism. All right, here it is. So you remember this because you're going to have to tell this to Sister Social Justice, right? Who says, well, I love Leo the 14th because Leo the 13th loves socialism. And social justice is socialism, right? Here's what he says in here. We speak of that sect of men who under various and almost barbarous names are called socialists, communists, nihilists, together in this wicked confederacy. So he condemned all of them, not just the commies. They meet in secret, strive to overthrow. By the way, look at that phrase, right? You can imagine somebody at America Magazine. Well, this just sounds like McCarthy-like red baiting. The communists want to overthrow all of society? Where's that coming from? Well, the closing words of the Communist Manifesto, where they call for the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Our popes read the book. You haven't, right? All right? Our popes read it. They read the stuff. They have nothing untouched. They debase the natural law, union of man and woman. Right? The family they go after. Well, where are they getting that? I mean, the Communist Manifesto talks about sharing. It talks about the abolition of the family. It uses those exact words. I shouldn't say this on tape. It's being recorded. All right, I'll be careful. I met with a guy in Indiana yesterday, somewhere in Indiana, who's now teaching the RCIA program at his church. And he was really upset that the previous person who was teaching it was teaching Rerum Novarum, and they weren't actually reading it, and was saying that it advances socialism and that isn't against socialism. And he confronted this person, and he said, you have to stop this because you're incorrect. And then she got upset, and then another person got involved, and then the other person said to him, okay, well, if you don't like it, do you want to teach the class? And he said, well, no, I don't. I don't have to. She said, well, then stop complaining. They said, all right, okay. So he's now teaching the class. And they're actually reading the document. They're actually reading the document. You have to read the document. You can't just go by what somebody says is in the document, right? You got to actually read it. And this is what it says. Yeah, exactly. Read the text. Read the text. All right. This is, Rerum Novarum was published in what year? Anyone know?
93?
No, close. 1891.
Okay.
So 40 years later, Pope Pius XI issues Quadragesimo Anno. You guys might want to take a picture of this one for Sister Social Justice. All right? Quadragesimo Anno, which means 40 years. So it's the 40th anniversary of Rerum Novarum. And here it is, section 120, religious socialism, Christian socialism are contradictory terms. No one can at the same time be a good Catholic and a true socialist. Catholicism and socialism are contradictory terms. You can't be a good Catholic and a socialist. And he says in there throughout that document, he says, to the extent that socialist aims claim that they're consistent with the gospel, maybe in helping the poor or whatever, he said, we don't, even if that were true, then why not just do the gospel? Why do communism, which is against the gospel and is atheistic? If that's true, if you're like, well, it's great, it's just like the gospel. Well, okay, first of all, you're wrong, but if that's what you think, then just do the gospel. There's a great line in there. He says, you should not connive at error in any way. Just follow the WWJD. What would Jesus do? Not WWMD. What would Marx do? Right? Just follow the gospel then. You have to go communist. This is Divini Redemptoris by Pope Pius XI. This is the document against atheistic communism. Came out in March 1937. My book, The Devil and Karl Marx, I think it's chapter 6, has all of these. I quote all of them, all one after another. So if you're looking for citations on these. But it referred to communism as a satanic scourge, godless, poisonous, from the pit of hell. So our church actually taught that communism is the work of the devil. It's satanic. It's diabolical. Look at some of these statements. Collectivistic terrorism, catastrophe, false messianic idea, intrinsically wrong. The Marxists were the powers of darkness. This is my favorite quote. Ronald Reagan used a quote just like this. And I don't know that Reagan ever read Divini Redemptoris, but Reagan had a lot of close Catholic connections. The evil that we must combat is primarily at its origin an evil of the spiritual order. From this polluted source, the monstrous emanations of the communist system flow with satanic logic. So again, you guys at American Magazine publishing the case for communism, your church referred to communism as satanic. And popes believed this, taught this. These are formal encyclicals. This is official church teaching. It wasn't just wrong, it was satanic. And at that point, 1937, It hasn't even killed over 100 million people yet. It hasn't even gone into China yet. Hasn't hit Korea yet. Hasn't hit Cuba yet. Cambodia. Mainly, it hasn't. The Iron Curtain hasn't even dropped yet. It's just the Soviet Union at that point.
Yeah, but 37, Khrushchev was sent into Ukraine by Stalin to collectivize the farmers.
Yeah.
They stripped the livestock, they stripped the crops, they killed by starvation 5 to 6 million people.
Yeah, no, that's good. This is right smack in the middle of the Ukrainian Holocaust, Holodomor, it's called, and it's in the middle of the Spanish Civil War during this period, where the communists were trying to take over Spain. Yeah. All right, let me skip ahead here. Here is,
Ron Collins.
this is the Vatican II Pope, right, John the 23rd, and Sister Social Justice loves him, right? Well, what did he say about socialism? No Catholic could subscribe to even moderate socialism, he said. Socialism takes no account of any objective other than that of material well-being. It places too severe a restraint on human liberty. That's his May 1961 encyclical letter. It's John the 23rd, Saint John the 23rd. All right, I'll talk about this in the next presentation, how the church really went after it under John Paul II. But a couple more slides. Going into modern day, Pope Benedict XVI condemned communism. I love this quote. This is one of my favorites. Very insightful. Spe Salvi in 2007. Marx presumed that with the expropriation of the ruling class, with the fall of political power and the socialization of the means of production, that a new Jerusalem would be realized, that they would create a heaven on earth, an earthly utopia. All you got to do is seize the means of production. Remember that Marx quote that I read from you? Well, if we can just regulate general production, I could hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, criticize after dinner, all this stuff. Marx thought that once the economy had been put right, everything else would immediately be put back together. The problem, he said this, John Paul II said it, Marxism fails not just economically, but anthropologically. It fails to understand human nature. It assumes that if you simply solve like a problem of wealth redistribution, that you'll have this new Jerusalem. But like Christ told Satan, man does not live by bread alone. Augustine said we have a God-shaped vacuum in each of us, not a dollar-shaped vacuum. So these guys, they think, well, you don't need religion. The key to making humanity happy is a more equal distribution of wealth by seizing the means of production. But we're spiritual creatures, right? We have a God-shaped vacuum, not a dollar-shaped vacuum. And again, as Jesus told Satan, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word, what? From the mouth of God. So these guys had everything completely backwards, totally messed up. Even Pope Francis agreed, right? December 2013, he said, quote, "The Marxist ideology is wrong." But the rest of that quote. Yeah. But I have many friends who are Marxists. And I got to tell you, because obviously I collect this stuff, that's all that he said about it. All that he said about it. He did make the comment about Acts 4:32, 4:35. He said, no, that's not Marxism, that's the gospel. That's pure Christianity. But he was not good on this subject, and I can't give you any strong anti-communist statements. He was not pro-communist, he was not a Marxist. He was more a Latin America, Argentinian, Jesuit, influenced by his environment, complete opposite of John Paul II in Poland. I don't think he supported liberation theology. kind of pro-redistributionist, pro-collectivist to some extent. One quote he liked that's critical of capitalism, referred to the idiot people an idolatry of free markets. You shouldn't worship free markets. I agree with that. But he did say, if you're looking for the kind of money quote, no pun intended, Marxist ideology is wrong. All right, this is my last slide here for this presentation. This is a righteous battle, though, that the church has won. And now we've got, I think, a Leo the 14th, who Vicki and I were talking. We've seen some quotes from him against communism that we're working on confirming, which are really encouraging and really come from Leo the 13th. So we have up there Leo the 13th at the top, JP2 at the bottom. Our buddy on the right, this is a segue to who we'll be talking about next. Fulton Sheen. Right? Fulton Sheen. All right, so we'll pick up with that after lunch. Thanks. I'll take any questions, or unless we're supposed to go straight to lunch, whatever you guys want to do. Yeah.
Did you say that Thomas Merton was a communist?
Yeah, so Thomas Merton, who, by the way, The Seven-Story Mountain by Thomas Merton is one of my favorite books. I love that book. At Columbia, he momentarily joined like the communist youth group, but then says that thanks to a professor that he had there who kind of talked him out of this junk, he moved pretty quickly away from it. And by the time he was writing Seven-Story Mountain, was definitely anti-communist. But while he was there at Columbia, he was becoming a communist at Columbia. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we're going to eat lunch, and then we'll pick up after lunch with talk on JP2, Reagan, Fulton Sheen, and how they went after communism. All right, thanks.